Welcome, everyone. My name is Fanny Martin, and I'm a senior project manager here at Park People. I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Yeah, I think we can start now just with a couple of technical points. So the webinar today will be recorded, which means that it will be made available on our website. You'll get links as well to all of this after the session. And during the webinar, we really encourage you to ask questions as our panelists are explaining, their experience and going through the way they work. So any questions you have, you can ask them directly into the chat box. We're going to start by actually testing this function. So if you hover your mouse on your taskbar at the bottom of your window, you should see something called a chat, the chat function. So let's start by just asking you your name and what city you're joining us from, to know who we've got in the room and how many of you are from Montreal, not from Montreal. It'd be great to know. Okay, so we've got Dylan from Vancouver, Wendy from BC, from Armstrong, Jessica from Brampton. Oh, we've got lots of people from Toronto, Mississauga, New York City.
This is great.
Yes, fantastic.
It's international.
Markham, Vancouver. Have we got anyone from Montreal? So we did the same webinar yesterday in French, and we did have people from Montreal as well. We got Calgary, Pickering. Well, that's a lot of park champions. So thank you so much to all of you for taking the time to join us and to tune into this webinar. Yeah, we've got about 40 people right now, so from across Canada and the States. So I'll start with talking a little bit about Park People and what we do. We're a national charity, and we work to support people to help them activate the power of parks and to improve the quality of life in cities across Canada. So as I just mentioned, we're a national network, and we've got a growing list of friends and members on our website. We also create free toolkits that we disseminate to share best practice. We distribute grants to support interesting projects in parks, and we organize local and national events, including a conference in Montreal that's coming up next year. I'll give more details at the end of the webinar. So today we're going to talk about park governance and taking a close look at Mount Royal specifically, and the partnership model that has been developed over 30 years between Les Amis de la Montagne, which is a not-for-profit organization, and the City of Montreal. So first of all, I'll just say a few words about park governance, just to be clear on terminology. City parks have long been managed and governed by public agencies, but we see now new partnership models emerging, where different ways of structuring the governance of parks are being put in place. Governance actually focuses specifically on the process of decision-making in parks and how these decisions are implemented. So to talk about this vast topic, I am very pleased to introduce our panelists today. We've got Hélène Panayotti, who's executive director of Les Amis de la Montagne. And we have Pierre-Paul Savignac, who is division head of the Bureau du Mont-Royal at the City of Montreal. Yes, they can say hi.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Pierre-Paul.
Hello.
And that was Hélène. Okay, you'll hear more about them and from them in a minute. Yes, they're going to be talking about this iconic mountain in the middle of the city and how they're working together to make the mountain and the park accessible to all. So we'll cover today specifically key elements in this cooperative way of working, and how they are so committed to engaging with stakeholders to make the most of dedicated resources and to always improve the quality of services that they offer to the public. So I will pass on to Pierre-Paul.
Yes, a few words on the park itself and the mountain first. I don't know, just to make sure that this interactive webinar works well and we use all the possibilities that it offers. How many of you sees the, I don't know if you see the icon, raise your hand on your screen. And if you could tell us how many of you guys had visited Montreal, or not Montreal, but the park itself, Parc Montreal in Montreal. How many of you paid us a visit at the mountain? Can we see?
Leila's been twice.
So a fair number of people came, I can see that. So those people know for sure that the mountain is an iconic part of Montreal. The park itself that is on the mountain represent only 20% of the mountain. For the park itself, it was designed in 1876 by Frederick Law Olmsted. Most of you probably know him, the famous landscape architect who did Central Park in New York City. But not only that famous park, many others in North America. But in 1876, a couple of Montrealers who were visionaries decided to give him a great job to design a park on our beloved mountain. He did so, and it was a success since then. So much so that today we have more than 5 million visitors at the park. 5 million visitors, it's a rough estimate. We are pretty sure that it's much more than that. We'll know for sure in the next few months. We will have a study on that, but it's a lot of people from Montreal. The park itself is 200 hectares, more than 200 hectares. But as I said, this park was designed in 1876, evolved with Montreal. At one point, it was completely surrendered by the city itself. So it grew. Its value grew with the city. So much so that institution came to the mountain as well. We not only have a park, we also have cemeteries that were there before the park, universities, hospitals. So on the mountain, we have this combination of a great park. It was designed by this very famous landscape architect, and many important institution of Montreal. And the mountain was always at the heart of people living in Montreal, even people who were living here before European came. The first people had the mountain in the, they came to the mountain for sacred reasons and other very functional reasons as well. So this is a few words on the emblematic side of Montreal. So when we're talking about a partnership with Les Amis de la Montagne, of course, it's in order to
Animate.
Thank you, the park itself. But there's a two-level partnership. There's not only this partnership on the level of the day-to-day use of the park, but as well on the consultation that is required in such emblematic heritage sites. In 2005, the entire mountain was designated a heritage site by the government of Quebec. So it means that the park is included in a greater ensemble. And it's a fairly complicated relationship that we have with all the great institutions, the university, the cemeteries, the stakeholders that are an association like Les Amis de la Montagne, Héritage Montréal, Centre Régional d'Écologie, so those partnerships, as they have to be taken care of, and this is why we have another level of partnership with all those stakeholders. There are 30 stakeholders, different, that varies in form and roles. So just to make sure that you understand that there's this two-level partnership that we have, maintaining, not maintaining, la gestion du parc, how would you say that?
Park management.
The management of the site. So there's a management for the day-to-day use of the park, and there's a management as well for the partnership that is required for the mountain.
Yeah. So maybe I could just add to that, before describing Les Amis de la Montagne, when Pierre-Paul said that the park was designed and opened in 1876, at that time, the population of Montreal was somewhere in the 75 to 80,000 people. So a very small population basically at the center where our downtown is. So the fact that over the last 150 years, Montreal has grown around the mountain, essentially, and not on the mountain, because it would have been, we call it a mountain, but it's actually a hill. It's one of the Monteregian hills, but Montrealers call it the mountain. And so the fact that the city developed around the mountain and not on the mountain is really a reflection of the dedication of the people of Montreal to preserving that green part and the green lung of Montreal. And it's really a credit to, over the generations, public involvement, the fact that citizens really cared about their mountain, and an openness on the part of our city administration. So in 1986, Les Amis de la Montagne was founded essentially as a very small grassroots movement who was opposing a project to create a huge telecommunications tower on Mount Royal, which we felt would deface the iconic landmark that Mount Royal is. And we won that battle, and quickly realized that that there was an ongoing purpose for Les Amis de la Montagne, essentially to advocate and also to educate for the protection and the enhancement of the mountain as a whole. So we've been active since then. We're still working with our founding president, who's been involved all along, and he reminded me, I guess 2 days ago, that with the Plante administration, we are into our 7th administration of working in partnership with the city in order to protect Mount Royal.
Thanks, Helen. So yeah, next slides. Just to also reiterate that, please do ask questions as we go along, and you can ask them about what the panelists are talking about right now, or you can ask questions in advance, and you know, there will be lots of opportunities for just, you know, answering your concerns or your questions or clarification as they arise.
So about what Les Amis de la Montagne does in the park and on the mountain, I'll start with the park, because that is the part where we have a formal agreement and partnership with the City of Montreal. According to the American Trust for Public Land, Les Amis de la Montagne is a conservancy. So we do have a formal agreement with the city to provide a certain number of services in Mount Royal Park. So those are just your classic visitor services with information, an information booth in Smith House, which is where Les Amis works. We actually have about almost 400,000 visitors who come through Smith House as kind of an introduction to the park, and we guide them in what they're able to do. We run all kinds of programs, from snowshoe excursions in winter to skate rentals and cross-country ski rentals for the 20 kilometers of cross-country skiing you can do in the mountain. We run a day camp in the summer. We run a cross-country ski school in the winter. We host thousands of school children in environmental education programs. We have a environmental patrol that actually interfaces with the public and answers questions and also guides them in the in how to best tread upon the natural spaces in Mount Royal. And I'm sure I'm missing some of the things that we do. We run also food or cafe outlets. We have 3 cafe outlets. So those are all, and our purpose in doing this is to be able to communicate with the 5 million park goers and to really instill upon them that this is a very special place, and that every one of us, every citizen, has their role to play in protecting this park and this extraordinary urban forest that we all enjoy. And we also do fundraising. So some of our revenue comes from paid park services, although we do a lot of we have a lot of programs that are free as well, but we also fundraise and have fundraised significant amounts of money for park improvements, always in agreement with the City of Montreal. And that has actually translated into actually also municipal investments in park improvement over the years as well.
Right,
Paul, maybe you want to.
Yeah, so before we go more in depth about the relationship between Les Amis and the city, we're going to have a couple of comments and questions. We've got John first, who commented that you provided an excellent background about the journey from confrontation to cooperation between Les Amis and the city. We've got a question from Doug to just clarify if Les Amis is an incorporated not-for-profit organization or registered charity.
Yeah, we're a non-profit charity.
Great. And, and then a question from Karen, who says that when you mentioned working with the 7th version of city administration since the founding of Les Amis, she wonders how you've carried the story or the institutional memory of this relationship with the city over this long period of time, and if there was re-education required with each change in staff and leadership.
Yeah, I guess my question is the changes within Les Amis Montagne or changes with every new administration?
The question is, how did you work with a changing administration, changes of staff? And
well, actually, it's a very good question, because every time there is a change in municipal government, Les Amis de la Montagne really makes a point of meeting the newly elected officials, and some of them are very well versed. Well, they're all Montrealers mostly to start out with, so they know the mountain as a member of the general public. But looking at it from the perspective of protecting and conserving and animating does require a certain, I guess, education or awareness building. And so Les Amis actually does give that surrounding the protection of both the mountain and Mount Royal's namesake park. And so it is ongoing work, but they also have public servants to rely on for that, and people like Pierre-Paul, who also probably have that role as well.
Pierre-Paul, do you want to say a few words about this?
Yes, of course. It's an ongoing responsibility that we share to make sure that everyone understands the value of this specific site, the heritage site. But one thing we have to remember is that the evolution was great for the past years. In 2005, it was an heritage site was created by the provincial government. That helps to to convey the message to everyone, citizens or elective representative alike. But still, we surprisingly enough, we still have to make sure that everyone understands the full value of the heritage site.
Thanks. Right. So we're going to talk more about the city side, and just before we get into you know, specifically what you will say about this site, Pierre-Paul, there's a question from John to know who would be who are it's difficult to mix French and English sometimes, okay? Who are the biggest supporters of Les Amis de la Montagne within the city, within the administration? Would that be politicians, park staff, public servants? Who's holding the flame?
I actually think it's a combination of people. I think Les Amis de la Montagne is a well-known nonprofit organization. We basically are in constant communication, and we work with the community. And I would say that many of our elected officials and many of our public servants are essentially people who know the mountain and who know Friends of the Mountain. I was joking with Pierre-Paul and saying, usually urban planners and landscape architects who retire from the City of Montreal become some of the most wonderful members of our committees, because we have a number of committees that focus specifically on development, as in urban planning and development, and on the protection of our woodlands and natural spaces, so environmental protection, as well as advocacy. And so we inherit these wonderful minds and these people who've actually dedicated their careers to the city, and then they turn to Les Amis to continue their work here. So the wisdom is not lost. And so I would say that our relationship with the city and the city with us is actually well established.
Great, thank you, Hélène. So we can hear from Pierre-Paul now about how that works out.
Yeah, actually, first of all, we have to, you have to understand that we are still very present, the city at the mountain. Of course, we manage the territory, where the people of Montreal are the owners of the park itself, and it's managed by the city with the help of Les Amis de la Montagne. This is why we have a formal agreement with them. In that agreement, we've stated precisely what is expected from Les Amis after a lot of discussion with them, of course. And every dollar that is invested in this formal agreement is rigorously monitored in order to make sure that finally, at the end of the day, the taxpayer, they have more services for every public dollar invested in this agreement. A few words of explanation why it's such a great thing for Montreal, that partnership. When it comes to spending money on parks, of course, we are in competition with public security, maintenance of all sorts, and parks. It's easy to put them on the sideway, saying that, oh, we'll invest in that when we have time or when we have the money. Or, of course, there's money that is invested in the parks, but is it enough to maintain a park like Montreal, which is so emblematic, so with so many visitors? it really helps to have this partnership with Les Amis de la Montagne to make sure that the level of service that the citizen or the visitors of the park receive is in accordance with the quality of the site. So of course, we still maintain the park. I say, of course, and it's not necessarily the case in every park where there's a partnership. Let's say in New York City, Central Park Conservancy, which is a bit like Les Amis, maintain the park as well. This is not the case in Montreal. The city still maintain the park. We still have some people there that are paid by the city, those workers from the city, who will be in interaction with the people who visit the park, who will answer questions. We have a patrol as well. It's not a matter of doing the same thing. It's doing thing in symbiose or in a partnership. So, but of course, we rely on this partnership, and it helps the appreciation of the park, of course, for the people of Montreal. If we talk about this partnership, what we can in exchange offer to Les Amis on top of course, our contribution is we're helping them in, let's say, providing a $0 lease for the many buildings that are occupied by their different function on the mountain, La Maison Smith, the pavilion at the lake, or the Grand Chalet. We also listen to them and see how we can provide new opportunities for them, like we did a couple of years ago when we realized that maybe the catering services would be a way for Les Amis to get in touch more closely with the people visiting Montreal, and maybe in the same meanwhile receiving an extra revenue from those activities. So it's an example that we make sure that this partnership works, evolve, and keeps getting better.
Great.
Yeah, so actually, just mentioning Smith House, just to sort of illustrate the partnership. The Smith House was purchased by the City of Montreal in the 1800s when they were actually purchasing this space in order to create the park. The Smith House had many lives, and when Les Amis was first created, we were operating out of downtown, and at one point it became interesting to have our center of activity in the mountain. So we had an agreement with the city whereby they would loan us or lease us a Smith House, but we went to our community and generated a significant amount of money in order to renovate Smith House. So that was done through philanthropic development. And
it's a beautiful example.
Time going in and generated philanthropic revenue, but Les Amis can, and so we did. We renovated it, and now it is being leased to us essentially for free, and that is where we host, you know, hundreds of thousands of visitors who come through Smith House as a point of entry into the mountain. Other philanthropic endeavors have translated, for instance, in the outfitting of Beaver Lake Pavilion with a artificial skating rink, and that is actually coming in very handy now because skating is becoming more challenging. Natural skating is challenging with our climate change conditions. And this was a leverage for significant investment made by the city in essentially restoring the whole pavilion. Actually, you see the pavilion on screen. I think you do. I do. In renovating the pavilion, which is where everyone goes for hot chocolate after a wonderful time skating or after a walk around Beaver Lake in summer. And the food services that Pierre-Paul was mentioning is another example. This was an opportunity for Les Amis another way for Les Amis to interface with park visitors by providing the service. and also a way of generating revenue. And I guess this is important to say that part of the agreement with the city is that all of our net revenue are reinvested in the park as well. So that is also good for the community, good for Montrealers, good for park visitors, good for everyone.
Thank you, Helen. So that's a very good. That's a very good example of the symbiotic relationship Pierre-Paul mentioned. Before we go to the next topic, which is going to be also generating questions, I'm sure, we're going to take one from Doug, which is for Pierre-Paul. Does the city provide funding to Les Amis beyond such things as the zero-cost lease agreements? And if so, what is that for? So does the city provide funding to Les Amis?
Yes, of course. When I was mentioning formal agreement, it's an agreement of a sum of money that is given to Les Amis de la Montagne for very, very specific activities, services for the public. We have to make sure that everyone understands that the money that is given from the city to Les Amis is for specific services directed directly to the visitors of the park, not the other, because the Les Amis de la Montagne, they are not only doing that, giving services to park visitors, they have other activities, but every dollar spent from the city is related to a specific topic. Let's say the camps, Ellen, help me out in English. I don't have the words.
The day camp, the ski school, our educational programs.
Thank you.
Our environmental stewardship program, that brings together thousands of volunteers who do work in the park. All of those are funded in part by the City of Montreal. And Pierre-Paul talks about regular reporting. I think we have 6 to 8 meetings a year where we report on these specific activities with measurable results and everything. It's all very, very, it's well reported, but the net result in terms of quality is that it transforms the park experience in that it is a park that is well run by the city and beautifully animated, in large part by Les Amis de la Montagne. And it feels like a park that is, it's the stewardship of the park is impacted in a very positive way by this relationship.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Ellen. I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands that the fact that we have this partnership stretch the public dollar. I mean, every dollar that is invested in this formal agreement with Les Amis is stretched by the capacity of Les Amis of doing more with that dollar than City of Montreal could do. And who benefits from that? The visitors, park visitors.
Yeah, including our ability to fundraise. So, yeah.
We've got one more question before we go into the next slide, which I'm going to position so we know that it's there to be developed. One question from Dylan, which comments that this agreement sounds extensive and very supportive. And he's wondering how long the process took to come to this agreement in its current form. So we can respond this briefly.
It was a long process. As Hélène said, it's a 30 years ongoing process that evolved tremendously. And it didn't happen like that overnight. It's a trial error thing, and it keeps on getting better, actually.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the wider partnership and the wider stakeholders on the mountain. Pierre-Paul, perhaps if you want to start with la table de concertation.
Yes, as I said, we have this wonderful partnership about the park, and we also have a greater partnership about the mountain and all the different stakeholders, the 30 stakeholders, the universities, the cemeteries, the institution, the association, and of course, all the municipal agencies and boroughs that are involved. So we meet a couple of times a year, 3 times a year. We sit down with everyone just to make sure that all the how would you say that, the les enjeux, the stakeholders, yes, but the main, I'm looking for the word in English,
the stakes,
the stakes, yeah, that the current stakes are dealt with. Let's say we had a good example just a couple of months ago. We had the emerald heart ash infestation in Montreal. So a lot of our trees, not only in the park, but also in the private properties of the park, not the park, but of the mountain, were at risk. And we worked together in order to make a strategy to get rid of the problem, not get rid of the problem, manage the problem. So that's an example.
Yeah. So one out of every trees on the forest of Mount Royal, which spans not only the park but also the cemeteries, McGill University, University of Montreal, the Oratory, etc. It can't be managed by. We all have to. We have to come together to develop a strategy to essentially deal with the emerald ash borer infestation. So that's an example where the only way of doing this is through concerted action by the Table de Concertation du Mont-Royal, the 30 stakeholders that Pierre-Paul is talking about, who all have a vested interest in making sure that the mountain is taken care of and preserved and protected for today and for future generations as well.
One thing that I can add on that is that the City of Montreal is the organization that federates everyone. We created Le Bureau du Mont-Royal in order to manage this larger partnership with our many stakeholders. And it's my team that organize every meeting, not only the great meetings of La Table de Concertation, but we have other, of course, smaller meetings with a specific subject in mind, like emerald ash or others. So it's more than dozens of meetings a year, more than that, actually, more like 20 meetings a year on specific subjects, in order to make sure that all the major
issues,
thank you, are dealt with.
Yeah, that's right. The really interesting thing about the Table de Concertation du Mont-Royal, and it was created at the same time as the mountain was designated as a heritage site by the City of Montreal, and both initiatives were actually citizen driven, and we had the good fortune of having both a provincial government and a municipal government who were very responsive to this desire to actually give a special status to the mountain territory in order to better plan its development and to better protect it. Actually, it was for governance reasons that this heritage status was given to the mountain and that the bureau was created. So what is so interesting is that each stakeholder, except for les Amis de la Montagne, whose sole purpose and raison d'être is to protect and enhance Mount Royal, all of the other stakeholders, such as, for instance, McGill University or the University of Montreal, they have their own mission. So education in their case, or hospitals is health, cemeteries, well, they're in the very clear business, etc. So these people, alongside their core mission, they are actually getting together, all of us are getting together for the sole purpose of discussing the mountain and its future and its issues. For instance, the Royal Vic Hospital, one of our iconic, it's 13 hectares on Mount Royal. 3 years ago, the Royal Vic moved to a new, huge super hospital, and the space is empty and not used. So it's repurposing, for instance. And how do you repurpose 13 hectares of essentially woodland that is a transition between the city and the mountain? These are the kinds of issues that all of the stakeholders that sit at the working table, at the table de concertation, actually debate, reflect upon, debate over, propose solutions to. And our work translates into a series of consensus that are formally presented to the mayor of Montreal. And so I think to date, we have about 50 consensus. I'm not sure how to make that plural. Consensus. And in literally every case, there is a concrete and usually very positive response on the part of the City of Montreal, who is ultimately, in most cases, the one that has a decision making, because these are issues that are larger than one particular property, and a lot of them have to do with the development, and they fall into the responsibility of the City of Montreal to make decisions on.
Great. Have we got any questions about the table? The working table is the name that seems to be working in English, or table de concertation. Just continue to add your questions, and we'll take them as you, are expressing them. We're going to continue to move into the slides, because now I want to give Pierre-Paul and Hélène some opportunities to also talk about values and learnings that have emerged from this partnership. And the first takeaway that they wanted to share and comment upon was that, I'll read it out loud for you. The partnership between Les Amis de la Montagne and the City of Montreal results in a better stewardship of the park and better services to Montrealers, frequent visitors and tourists. So Pierre-Paul, perhaps would you like to just add a few comments or examples about what this means for Montreal and for citizens?
Well, as I said a couple of minutes ago, for us, it's a matter of giving better services to the visitors with the help of Les Amis. It's not only an economic gain for the city. It's not only a matter of money. It's a matter of quality of services for the visitors of the park. And when I say quality, is services that are in resonance with the heritage site where the park is which it's included. It's not an ordinary park where you can do everything that everyone wants to do. It's a very vulnerable space that you have to cherish, that you have to protect in order to make sure that the other generation will be able to enjoy it like we do today. So it really takes a lot of understanding of the sensitiveness. Do you say that? Sensibility of the park in order to make sure that it's managed in a way that won't harm the park. So of course we give better services for less public money, but it's given in a way that is respectful for the park and the specific heritage site where it's located.
Great. The next takeaway is a collaborative governance model that allows the community to participate in enlightened decision-making regarding the mountain's future. And just before, perhaps, Hélène, you want to talk about this, I'm going to insert a question that comes from John, who would like to know if the working table creates the specific issue-driven groups, and who decides who participates on these smaller groups. So that's, just to go a bit deeper into this idea of collaborative governance model.
So
I could start, Hélène, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The working table was created by the city by a resolution of the municipal committee, and the components of the table of the group is it's a decision actually. It's a list of groups that are members of that working group. So it's a decision from the elected representative.
And how do they choose their issues as well? How are they, just shared within, who sits at which small meetings, basically?
Well, the issues come up by themselves, whether it's the media or let's say there's a crisis on some issues. Fairly recently, we had an article in the paper saying that we might have downhill ski on Montreal. That would be a comeback because since the 70s, it was not possible to do it, and that issue just came by itself with this article in the paper, and the group start every members of the group start talking to each other. Oh, have you heard about this? And so on and so forth. So the issues come up by themselves sometimes, or it's a promoter. Let's say one private owner wants to do an intervention on his property, and he wants to know what the group thinks about this project. He can present the project to the table. Let's say the Royal Victoria Hospital. It's public knowledge that there are some studies of how we could have a new function to those buildings. So the promoters will come and present the project for the new use of those this former hospital. That's an example. Thanks. And of course, let's say it's the problem is with the preservation of the heritage architecture or the heritage landscape. Then we will have some specialists that are from the groups that will join in.
Fantastic, thank you, Pierre-Paul. And Ellen, I was wondering if you might want to say a few words about how the community is enabled to participate in the decision making.
I can.
Yeah, because I think Helen might have frozen.
Well, actually, the public, of course, the public will be able to influence some of the groups, like Les Amis de la Montagne or Héritage Montréal, which are a group that focus on heritage. And this is how the public could actually influence the debate at the working group. But it's not, the members of the public are not invited to the group or to the reunion of the group.
Great, thank you, Pierre-Paul. So I think it's just you and me.
Okay.
But continue to ask your questions, and if you've got questions that are for Ellen, we'll make sure that she will get them as well at the end of the webinar. So let's go to our next takeaway message, which is about a relationship based on trust and respect. So very much value-based.
Yeah, as I mentioned, it was since the beginning of our relationship, Les Amis and the City of Montreal, it's been a great experience. We had some difficulties. We always were able to discuss those difficulties and find solution. And this is why we are both sure that without trust and respect, we cannot have this. We cannot have a relationship like this. And one thing that is, I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. One thing that is important as well is that you understand the other member, your partner. Let's say you're a city, you work with a group like Les Amis de la Montagne. You have to understand their limits. You have to understand how they can help you out. Same way for the partner, and then you can both find opportunities for them to grow in this partnership. So it's really a two-way street. You cannot make this partnership work if you want to impose a certain way for action for the partner, and it's on both sides. I mean, it's the same thing for les Amis de la Montagne. The City of Montreal will always be the owner of the site, and the elective representative of the city will always be the one that will make the final decision as far as the park is concerned, of course. But we have City of Montreal, we have to listen to les Amis de la Montagne, we have to listen to the stakeholders. It's the only way to manage such an iconic park like this. Not only an iconic park, there's other parks. It would be that work with a partnership like this, and it's the same thing. So we have benefits, but is always we have to give some listening, some understanding as well, and the same for our partner.
Fantastic.
Does that make sense? Yes.
Yeah, well, to me, yes. Do ask questions. You know, I encourage our participants to ask questions at this stage. And like I said, if they have questions for Hélène as well, we'll pass them on. And to conclude, Pierre-Paul, you wanted to mention that was very important to you, that this partnership improves the quality of life in Montreal.
Yes, we are quite sure that without this partnership, the park wouldn't be the same. The level of the quality of the services wouldn't be the same. So who benefits from that? Of course, it's the visitors, the citizens of Montreal who go there regularly. Sometimes you won't realize it, but when you're when you are in the management of it, you can easily see that the park wouldn't be such a great place if we didn't have that partnership with Les Amis de la Montagne.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Pierre-Paul. We've got about 2 minutes or 3 minutes for questions if you have. And like I said, you know, you can also continue to get in touch with us by email. We'll be sending, actually, I can talk about this now. We'll be sending you right now a link to the case study that has been written about this governance model. So it's going to appear in your chat box. We're going to send you links to the websites of Les Amis de la Montagne and of the Table de Concertation du Mont-Royal, which I believe, Pierre-Paul, is only in French, is that correct? Or you've got sections in English too?
No, I'm not sure about it. I'm sorry. I will check.
We'll discover. And there will be a link to the webinar evaluation as well. So I think there's a question. Oh, we're just sending you the link. Yeah, I've got a question here, last question, I believe, which is from Fiona, about the through roads that was recently severed across the mountain. So a road that's been cut, perhaps?
Yes.
Or, yeah. So what's the longer term vision for vehicular and pedestrian access to the mountain? And we've got about 2 minutes if you want to take.
Oh wow, that's a.
is that more than 2 minute kind of question?
That's a large question, but I can talk about that for a couple of seconds. Actually, we have that road that across the park that was done in the 50s, in 58 actually. It replaced then a tramway line, 2 tramway lines. And when the tram was removed, it was replaced by this road that is more like a expressway than anything else. Today, and this road had a great impact on the way people in Montreal reached the park. It was the 50s, the car was everywhere, and it was modern to make sure that the landscape was reflecting this new relationship that we had then with the cars and the way to move ourselves. Of course, now in inner cities, everyone knows that the car is seen more like a source of a problem sometimes. When we have a very a small place with lots of cars, we have a problem. And this is what happens in Montreal. Sometimes the parking lot at the center of the park are full. What will we do? Will we just expand the parking lots? Of course not. We want to diversify the possibility of accessing to Montreal in a different way. So we are been doing this project last summer. It will end in few days, actually, at the end of the month. We cut the possibility to use this expressway that was done in the 50s to just go through the park. So only people that would that wanted to come to the park could use it. So it wasn't possible to go through the park. A lot of people were doing just that. Actually, 80% of the people that were in cars were just going through the park. So it was a lot of cars. People in New York knows what was done by the present administration. The administration in New York said, okay, parks are for people. We'll just remove the car from the parks. And this is what we were experimenting with this summer. Why? In few words, just to try to project ourselves in the future and see what we could do if we remove this expressway. How could we create something else, which will promote other ways to access the park than the automobile.
That's a great conclusion. Thank you so much, Pierre-Paul. So park, back to the people. I'll just finish our webinar by talking about our next webinars on best practices for city parks. So we'll have one on Wednesday, November the 14th, same time, 2 p.m. East time. So which will also be about park governance, but with different examples. And we'll have one on the 12th of December about Maple Arts, which is a Toronto-based community arts organization that's been working in parks for quite a few years now, and they've developed an approach to make park a safe landing place for newcomers. I'll just say a few words as well about our conference in Montreal, which will be from the 12th to the 14th of June 2019. We've got a mailing list that you can find on our website where you can specifically register for updates if you'd like to know more about when registration opens. That will be in a couple of months. And I hope you had a lovely time with us and with our panelists. It's a shame that we lost Hélène, but if you've got questions and comments, you can put them in the survey that we've sent you a link to. And I hope we see you at the next webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pierre-Paul.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.